Hi booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing very well. Today I'm going to be doing the mid-year freakout tag. It's a tag that a lot of booktubers tend to do every year, and it's a chance to look back at the first 6 months or so of the year and look at how things are going. I was tagged to do this by two people, by Pat from Book Chat with Pat and Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics. So yeah, thank you both for the tag. Let's jump right in. So the first prompt is the best book that you've read so far this year. And for me, my favourite book I think that I've read so far, the book that stayed with me the most, and the book that just while I was reading it I felt I was enjoying the most, was the Letters of Van Gogh, which were just really lovely. I think firstly hadn't expected him to be as wonderful a writer he is in his letters. That was a wonderful surprise. But as well with the editorship, this is edited by Ronald Deleu, and it's translated by Arnold Pomerans, and Deleu's editorship just makes it feel almost like you're reading a biography of Van Gogh, with just the letters that he selects and the sort of bridging material that he writes to sort of explain things that are going on that he's got from other family records. So it's yeah, a really wonderful book, and one that I can definitely see myself returning to in the future. Number two is best sequel that you've read so far this year. As far as I'm aware, I've only read one sequel so far, and that is, or strictly speaking, the second book. But it's the Missing of Clairdelune by Christelle Dabos. This is translated by Hildegard Searle, and it's the second book in the Mirror Visitor series, and it's just a wonderful sort of steampunky fantasy series about this young woman called, and now her name's gone straight out of my head, Ophelia, who is in this really strange sort of alternate version of Earth where the world has been sort of fragmented into these various shards, and each shard, they're called arcs, and each one has its own family spirit. Each family spirit has its own sort of powers, which is then sort of characteristic of that arc where they live. And it's about her moving from her family arc of Anima to this distant polar arc, and she's been promised in marriage, and that's sort of the setup for the first book. This second book, there's just an added element of mystery to it. I think this is a bit more of a mystery book, sort of on top of everything else that's going on. Some of the others are also in their own way. The first book is really just getting used to the world, and then this book just follows on wonderfully from there. So I really enjoyed it. So even though it's the only sequel really, unless you're counting books 3 and 4 of the series, but I didn't really have anything else to show, but it was a really good sequel, and so it kind of worked out. Number 3 is a new release that you're excited to read. I'm gonna, this isn't going to be strictly speaking new releases here, but relatively recent books. And I've got 2 to talk about. The first one is, let's see how old it is. So it's 3 years old now, which is very new for me. I rarely get round to books quite so quickly. But this is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, which has really piqued my curiosity, just with its subject matter and the period that it's set in. And so I'd really quite like to try this. The other one I've been thinking of is a book I don't own yet, but it's called The New Roman Empire, and it's by Anthony Kaldellis. And Kaldellis is a Byzantine historian, and it's his big mammoth history of Byzantium. But as the title suggests, it's the new Roman Empire, or the sort of continued Roman Empire, and he's well, I think it's something that's actually seems to be kind of something in the air at the moment with Byzantine studies, where they're actually trying to get away as much as they can from the word Byzantine or Byzantine, however you pronounce it, since that's something that's been sort of placed on them by later historians. They themselves saw themselves as the Roman Empire, and that's what they called themselves. They called themselves Romans, and so that's very much what he's tapping into, and it seems to be the thesis of the book, or at least a kind of through line, and something he's trying to get across in there. And I've heard really good things about it, and so far I think it's been out for about a year or so now, but it's still only out in hardback at the moment, I think. So I'm going to wait, and hopefully we'll see a paperback at some point. And then number 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. This is one where I don't have an answer. There was just nothing that sprang to mind, and I felt like that was a good sign that there wasn't really anything that I'm keeping my eye out for. There might be something that comes to mind later, but I couldn't think of anything just at this moment. Number 5 then is the biggest disappointment, and that will be a book that I no longer have, because again, it's something I'm trying to get better at this year, which is when I finished a book and I have quite a strong feeling that I'm probably not going to read it again, at least not in the immediate future, not in the next few years, then I'm quite happy to just get rid of it. So I'm trying to be a bit better at that, and I've done that with this book, because I didn't particularly enjoy it. There were some redeeming features, but that was the Strudlhof Steps by Heimito von Doderer, which is a kind of sprawling, not quite a family saga, but it's about these various families and friends and how they're all interconnected. And I just felt the book didn't quite know what it wanted to be. It didn't know what vein it wanted to be in, and where some books can quite comfortably jump between different modes and be happy in one moment and quite jovial and silly, and then be a little more serious and dour at other points. I just felt like this book didn't know what it wanted to be, and a lot of the time it was just a bit ridiculous, and when it wasn't ridiculous it was a bit boring, and just every now and then there'd be flashes of just either wonderful writing or interesting character development, but on the whole I just found it a bit of a inconsistent soup. Really, that's what I thought of it. So that's been my biggest disappointment so far this year. My biggest surprise, again, a book I can't show you, but I read it on my Kindle, and it's called Ghost on the Throne. I've forgotten the name of the author, so if you look in my description, I'll have all of the books that I've mentioned, so I'll have the name of the author in there. Is it Stephen A. Romm, potentially? But it's a story about it's the history of what happened to the empire of Alexander the Great after he died, and about the infighting and the civil war that ensued afterwards. And I was a little confused. There were a lot of new names, and it's just a new subject to me. It's not really something I've looked into that much before in my reading, but I found it really fascinating, and I wasn't as confused as I expected to be. And there were some characters that Romm just did an amazing job of bringing to life, and I was really rooting for them, even if some of them were ultimately doomed. So I really enjoyed it. It was just a lot of fun to read, which is always nice to say about a book of history. And so that's one that really stood out, and I can remember being surprised by. A favourite new author, so sort of more of a new to me author that I read, a poet that I decided to take a chance on, that I'd sort of heard of a little bit around the beginning of the year. And that's Geoffrey Nutter. This is his collection, Giant Moth Perishes, and I just found it to be delightful, and I would like to read a lot more of his poetry, so I'll get round to that at some point. A couple of others to go through quickly. Newest fictional crush. In past years, and this is a bit gruesome and maybe a little cruel of me, I try to find characters I've read of that have literally been crushed, which isn't very nice. But a couple of years ago, I was reading Crime and Punishment, and there's the character Marmeladov, who's run over by a horse and carriage, which is why his name is kind of like marmalade. It's a bit of a cruel pun on Dostoevsky's part. But as well, last year, I read Les Miserables, and there's a character in there, one of the secondary characters. I can't quite remember his name, but it's the man that Jean Valjean rescues, where he's stuck underneath a cart and is, injured his leg. And so in the last 2 years, I've had fictional crushes to talk about, but to the best of my memory, there aren't any fictional crush victims so far, at least none that spring to mind. So I'm sorry to report. Number 9, my newest favourite character, and again, I've written NA, not applicable here, because there haven't been many characters who have really stood out to me more. I suppose potentially the way Van Gogh as a character stood out, and some of the characters in A Ghost on the Throne potentially, but I've been reading, it seems to be a question that's concentrated more towards novels, and I've been reading some novels this year, but not quite as many as in previous years, and I'm wondering whether that's why there aren't more people who are potential new favourite characters for me. Maybe it is just because I'm reading less novels at the moment, or fewer novels. Number 10 is a book that made you cry. I don't think a book has made me shed a tear so far this year, but a couple of books got me close. One would be Radical Wordsworth by Jonathan Bates, just a wonderful biography of William Wordsworth. And often in biographies, when it gets to the end and the characters are getting old and their relatives are dying and their friends are dying, if the author is doing a good job, then that will hit you, and that did hit me. But then he goes on to talk about Wordsworth's resonance after he died, and that was, it wasn't just sad. There was something kind of exultant in the writing, and there's this big uplift at the end of the book, this big surge of emotion, which was wonderful, and just moving in another way. So that's one that kind of got me close in sort of two different ways, I suppose. And then another one that sort of cut me, that got me unawares, was the 77 Dream Songs by John Berryman, and just the last two Dream Songs. I think because he's, a lot of these poems are either quite sad or just quite quite bleak from time to time, although there is humour throughout as well. But there's a sense of optimism. Maybe it's doomed optimism, but there really is a sense of optimism as it gets towards the end of this first volume of his dream songs. And I was quite moved by it, and I wasn't expecting for it to hit me quite the way it did. So that's the other one that almost got me crying. And then 11 is a book that made you happy. And this is a book I read quite early on in the year, I think in January. And this is The Good Soldier Svek by Jaroslav Hasek. This is translated by Joseph Larder. I think, no, let me double check that. No, it's not. Sorry, the illustrations are by Joseph Larder and the translation is by Cecil Parrott. But Svek himself is just such a wholesome and jovial character that I think whenever you come to this book, if you give it a go, you'll just sort of feel refreshed. I think, even though a lot of a lot of the humour is quite dark and sometimes it's quite slapstick, and in part it is a way of talking about the futility of war and things, and it's a book all about the First World War, but done with so much humour, and so it was a lovely sort of uplift early on in this year's reading for me. And then where are we up to? We're up to number 12, which is your favourite book to film adaptation so far this year. And to the best of my knowledge, I haven't seen a book to film adaptation. I haven't watched many films this year. I'm sort of in a phase where I'm not really watching many films, and so unfortunately I don't have anything to say there. And then number 13 is your favourite review, whether written or in a video, or just your favourite booktube video. I decided to go with that. I haven't done many, although I've been doing my reading updates, I haven't really done any specific reviews this year. Potentially it'll be something I'll get to at some point, but we'll see how it goes. But I made a video a week or so ago that I think is my favourite video that I've made so far this year, which was a random bookshelf tour. I just sort of reorganised some of my shelves, and there was this one shelf that was just very different, where I put some sort of classy books, some Everyman's Library hardcovers, some New York Review of Books classics and things like that. And I just decided to do an impromptu library tour or bookshelf tour of just that shelf, out of the blue, and I really enjoyed it. So maybe I'll have a look and see if there are any other areas of the library that have changed recently, that are a bit different, and maybe I'll do something similar with them. Number 14 then is the most beautiful book that you've bought or received so far this year. And for me, there are two that I bought recently that I think are really lovely in their own way. In terms of just the cover and the way the book looks on the outside, although this is a slightly beaten up, but it's Aesthetes and Decadence of the 1890s, and this is an anthology of the decadent movement. I need to get rid of that sticker there. So obviously it's got Oscar Wilde, and I think it's got some Walter Pater in the back. I just love the way this book looks, and I love the spine as well, so it just makes me happy when I see it on the bookshelf. And the other one is Meetings with Remarkable Manuscripts by Christopher de Hamel, and this is about someone who's a real expert on manuscripts, talking about manuscripts, and that's basically it. And it's got just tons of illustrations in there. And even though this is just the paperback, it's a really lovely little book, and it feels nice in the hand. And I'm looking forward to getting to this. I might try and get to this soon. We'll see. And then we've got a few more things. We've got the last prompt, which might take a while. I think it often does, because it's what books do you need to read by the end of the year? There are no books that I need to read by the end of the year necessarily, but I've set some rough goals, and there's some projects underway, some reading groups that I want to be a part of, and we've made some plans, so I'm going to go through some of those. A book I'm in the middle of, and will probably take the rest of the year to get through, is the Anatomy of Melancholy by Robert Burton. I'm currently on a bit of a break, but I might pick it up at some point in the next few weeks. And there is something to it that I do enjoy in terms of the writing style, and occasionally in a quirky way in the subject, and it's always interesting to see what different people have believed at different times, and how just our knowledge about certain subjects have changed over time, and you can see that sometimes the seeds of certain practices, and then in other ways it's more of a contrast, and just seeing how we've developed sort of scientifically in thought, and even in the way we treat sources, and the way we think critically, and things like that. And so it's interesting in that way, but it's it's a dense one, and it's a dangerous object as well. Next up, we've got a book I'm hoping to get to next month. For some reason, I just felt like this was one I wanted to read in August. It feels like an Augusty book to me, and that's Middlemarch by George Eliot. I've only read the sort of either short story or novella. Is it Cousin Jacob? I think I had to read that at university, and that's all I've read by her. But yeah, I mean it's Middlemarch, so I have to read it at some point. A book that just keeps eluding me. I keep saying I need to read it, and I just never read it. I keep forgetting that it's a book I need to read, and that's the Silmarillion. And I would like this year to be the year that I finally get round to reading the Silmarillion, because I've been saying I want to read it for a very long time, and it's time I was true to my word. So that's one I'd like to get to. And then I'd really like to read some more W.G. Sebald. I read his, what was it, On the Natural History of Destruction a month or two ago, which was really good. And there are a couple of things either by or about him that I'd like to get to. I might get to The Emigrants. It's I think his first novel, and certainly one of the shortest. It's just over 200 pages. So I might go for this one first, and with it being short, it might be something that can slide in easily. Or I might read Speak the Silence in Search of W.G. Sebald, and this is by Carol Angier, so a biography of Sebald. So I'm not sure which way I'll go, or maybe I'll find time for both. I'm not too sure. But then we're coming on to the bulkier things that are really the big projects. So for later this year, I think maybe starting in either September or October, maybe November, I'm not sure. I've got a Faustian project that I'd like to do. So there are 3 things I'd like to read, and I'll give each one a fair bit of space, that its own month or so to read. And I'd like to start off with Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, and this is a wonderful Norton critical edition, so it's got loads of, we've got all the contexts and the secondary materials and such. And so the plan is to read the play, which is relatively short, and then go through all the critical material. And then to do the same thing with Goethe's Faust, so again a Norton critical edition. This one I'm feeling a little more intimidated by, but I'm also really looking forward to it. And then to cap things off, then I'd like to read Thomas Mann's novel Dr. Faustus as well, in the John E. Wood's translation, which is, it's only 500 or so pages, but I've heard it's one of his more difficult books, and so that's that'll be the one I finish off with. And then two more. We're going to finish off with the modernists. So I've got a couple of modernist poetry projects for later on in the year. First up, I was invited by Pat from Book Chat with Pat to join in with a reading group going through T.S. Eliot's pretty much his complete poems. I think it's headed up by Thomas from Art and Literature Matters, so I'm going to try and read the collected, or at least the complete poems. I might then go off on a side quest and read some of the plays, I'm not sure. And then the other one, starting in August, I believe, with Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads and Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics. We're going to try and read the cantos by Ezra Pound. This is one I think I'll be needing secondary material for. Very strange and all-encompassing poetry. He's trying to create a sort of systematic history of the world in poetry. We'll see if he succeeds. I've read excerpts from the cantos before, but it's 800 pages of fairly perplexing poetry in sometimes multiple languages and multiple alphabets. So we'll just see how that goes. But that's it. That is my mid-year freak-out tag. So if you'd like to give this a go, then I've left all the questions down in the description, so please feel free to give it a go. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I hope your first half of the year has been good in terms of reading and in everything else. For now, that's everything. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.